We are following breaking news out of New York City, where at least 2 people have climbed to the very top of the Empire State Building. You can see them there. They're on the antenna with a flag.
That is 1,554 feet above the ground. They appear to be protesters and have unfurled a banner that says, "When the power of love beats the love of power, the world knows peace." NBC New York is covering all of it. We're going to take a listen right now to their coverage.
We're able to see what was written on that flag that we have talked about. But in terms of down here on the ground, I mean, this is another day in Midtown. People are rushing to work. They're rushing to lunchtime. They're rushing to Penn Station. There's people here for the World Cup, of course. There's people really swirling around MSG as there's so much activity going on and questions, of course, about Taylor Swift's wedding. And that's exactly what we were doing just a block away from all of this unfolding. Of course, at the Empire State Building, that I can tell you that there's a lot of confusion. Now, of course, that I'm standing here reporting to you live, there's several people behind me listening to what I'm saying, and now they're looking up, but really people are going to where they need to go. So really business as usual while we are looking up at just this incredible and terrifying sight. These 2 people on top of the spire of the Empire State Building, clearly making a massive statement, given that they are high above Midtown and high above the Empire State Building, with that message reading that when the power of love beats the love of power, the world knows peace. And we, of course, as John mentioned, it is a quote and a reference to Jimi Hendrix. So, yeah, a lot of normalcy happening on the ground here in New York City as people are bopping around doing what they need to do. But, yeah, just what a sight that we are seeing even from the ground, to see that flag flying just high above Midtown, Gilma.
Yeah, New Yorkers largely unfazed, as they tend to be. But Jess, while I have you there, I'm guessing you can see the flag. This is still over 1,400 feet high. So can they even make out anything else that's happening without the help of say, a chopper camera like we have right now?
Exactly. Just from my eyes, we looked up, of course, we saw that dark flag banner flying. But no, I could not. I was like, wow, what does it say? And of course, it took our reporting from our Chopper 4 journalist up there, who was able to give us that clear vantage point and a closer look at the actual text. So people down on the ground, yes, they are seeing that black thing that is flying off of the spire. I mean, you really, with the naked eye, unless we're zooming in on our actual camera here, I wasn't even able to see at first if those 2 people were still up there. And then, of course, as we zoomed all the way in from our broadcast camera here, we were able to see their bodies still standing there, which is just so wild to see. 2 human beings still up there, all the way up there. But down on the ground, Gilma, as you mentioned, you really can't see the specifics, but you can absolutely see that banner.
Yeah, very precarious situation. Jessica Cunnington, thank you for sharing what you can see from your vantage point. Right now, you're taking a live look at our sky camera that is on the Empire State Building. It's offering a different perspective here. You can see what doesn't change, though, is that you can see these 2 people hanging on precariously. They've unfurled this banner here for the better part of 30 minutes now. Joining us on the phone is Terrence Monahan, former NYPD Chief of Department and NBC4 contributor. Terrence, can you tell us whether you've ever seen a protest similar to this before? This is a very rare sight for us, and whether you know anything about how they could have scaled the Empire State Building and avoided all the security measures in place.
That's some questions that are going to have to be answered. You know, Empire State Building has their own private security up there that's usually very aware as to what's going on. I've never seen anything like this on a building the size of the Empire State Building. You know, we've seen this quite often, people climbing towers of bridges to hang signs, and we've gone there, we've made arrests. I know PD's responding there now, working with the security over at the Empire State Building to get these individuals into custody and just find out what the heck they're doing and how they did it. There's a lot of questions to be answered.
And Terry, it looks like the best case scenario right now is for these 2 individuals
to make listening to NBC New York. Clearly breathtaking, terrifying images. Not clear how those 2 people breached the security there to get to the top of the antenna.
We'll keep following it. Stay right here. Well, welcome back. It is 12:30 Eastern Time. I'm Vicki Nguyen.
And I'm Sam Brock.
We are following some breaking news right now out of New York City, where at least two people, you see them there, have climbed to the very top of the Empire State Building. They're standing on a platform on the antenna.
They appear to be protesters. They also appear to be costumed. They're clearly holding a banner there that once the wind picks up and it unfurls, you'll see it says, "When the power of love beats the love of power, the world knows peace." NBC New York covering all of this right now. We're going to check in with them right now for some of their coverage.
Yeah, they've climbed other structures, but I think this is probably the highest and most dangerous that I've seen in my time.
Exceptionally dangerous. Right now, we're looking at these chopper photos. We're seeing at least one individual seems to have taken a couple steps down, but we've seen that a couple of times as we've been following this. So unclear if they're just moving to stretch their legs, unclear what the plan is here. But for the better part of 30 minutes, 30 plus minutes, we've seen these two protesters. Again, a little movement here. Two protesters at the top of the spire with this banner unfurled, a quote about love attributed to Jimi Hendrix. Unclear what their plan is. They do have the eyes of the world now. A spectacle, what authorities would call a very dangerous spectacle that could endanger themselves or others. Terry, do you happen to have, I know this is a wait and see kind of situation, but how long may it take before authorities would have to step in here?
It's going to take a little time. I am sure that there are authorities down below right now speaking to these individuals, trying to convince them to come down on their own. But if we have to go up there, if NYPD needs to go up that spire, it's going to take some time to get the emergency service teams in place up there and equipped with the equipment that they may need to climb that spire safely. So we could be sitting here watching this for a while unfolding.
Tell me a little bit more about the specialty unit that would have to step in here if needed.
This is the emergency service unit. These are individual cops that have trained. Really, the training goes on for 6 months, where they do all sorts of different scaling of buildings, jumping out of helicopters, rappelling downside the building. They are the elite of the elite. They will have to get there, figure out what equipment they're going to need, harnesses or climbing equipment that they need to go up that spear. And also, once you get up to these individuals, what sort of harness or gear you can put on that individual to be able to get them down safely. So it's going to take time. It's going to take the experts showing up on the scene, talking to the Empire State people who know their building and know the accesses and ways up, and figuring out a plan. So the plan is going to take some time to develop, and eventually they'll have to go up there safely. In all logic, hopefully with the world, everyone watching these guys, they're getting their message, whatever silly message it might be, across, and they can come on down now. And that's going to be the ultimate goal, trying to talk them down before any NYPD officer has to go up.
Yeah, getting them down to safety. At this point, we're unsure of any protest group that these two individuals may be associated with. They've been up there for now 30 plus minutes with the eyes of the world watching. We would hate to see other people have to get up to help them. The best case scenario, as Terry has been mentioning, is for these two individuals to find a way to come down safely. Again, we have to point out the elements because it's 86, 88 plus degrees, the heat index much higher than that. Wind could be a factor. These conditions are exceptionally precarious for these two individuals and other people. But Terry, I do want to talk about this breach of security, because if you've been to the Empire State Building, really the only way that guests can find themselves up there is by buying a ticket. You would get to the observation deck, and we do know that there is a security wall in place to prevent, for lack of a better phrase, any kind of shenanigans, right? They want to keep people safe who are visiting.
Yeah, absolutely. This is a major break in their security. I'm sure the Empire State people are going to have to analyze it, figure out exactly how they beat their security, which is very hard to do. I mean, do they work in the building and decided to do something? I don't know. It's all going to have to be figured out. In time. It's not an answer we're going to have right away. But however they were able to accomplish this, I am sure there'll be a revamping of their security, and decisions will be made on how to prevent this in the future.
Yeah, Terry, still so many unanswered questions here. We're going to ask you to stick around to help walk us through this. But we keep talking about the elements. New Yorkers know that this is the beginning of a possible heat wave. It is exceptionally hot out there. Let's check in with Storm Team 4's Dave Price. Dave, you and I were talking this morning about these are conditions we need to be wary of. We need to stay indoors when at all possible. And here there are these two individuals who are risking themselves, sharing this message, putting so many other people at risk too. Talk to me about these conditions.
Well, a couple of things. First of all, it is exceptionally hot outside. It's exceptionally humid. If you take a look right now, they're beginning to make their way down the spire. Now, keep in mind, this is basically what's called urban free soloing. Some people call it buildering. These are untethered climbers. And the danger.
Okay, you've been listening to NBC New York. NBC News national law enforcement and intelligence correspondent Tom Winter is joining us now. Just for context, these two protesters are up 1,450 feet in the air. It does look, Tom, right now like they're starting to make their way down from the top of the spire. But I know we all have many questions right now about just how a security breach could happen that would allow two people to get to the very top of the Empire State Building.
Yeah, I'm going to answer that question in a second. I mean, the fact that they appear to be coming down on their own, and let's hope that that's the case, is actually a really good sign. I mean, this is an incredibly difficult and dangerous situation. The NYPD absolutely has the ability and is trained to be able to go up and try to talk to these two individuals to get them down. They were involved in a high-profile incident recently where there was an individual who was suicidal. They were out on the ledge of a very tall skyscraper here in the building. Because of the nature of that incident, we would not have broadcast it live. This is extremely unusual, and so that's the reason why we're focusing on it now. The NYPD aviation is there. Their Bell 419 helicopter is up over the scene. That's one of their newer aircraft that they have the ability to have as detailed a camera as we have. They can send that information, stream it back to every NYPD executive, including to the smartphones of the officers who are no doubt arriving up there now, harnessing up and getting ready to put up their rigging to try to go up there or at least talk to these individuals. If they come down on their own, that would be a great thing for all involved. That would mean that they would be uninjured, and it would mean that there would be no risk of injury to officers. To get to your question, Sam, as far as the security breach, look, this is going to raise enormous questions. This is almost, frankly, difficult to watch. I have a bit of a fear of heights, so
We're all feeling the same way right now.
Keep an eye
I
out
love
for
you
you,
both,
Tom.
but
as we
I'm going to
talk.
look at you guys for just a quick second here. So basically, you know, this building has the public component. People can go up to the observatory there.
Right.
There's tight screening and security for that. You also have the fact that those are active antennas. They are transmitting right now radio and television in the tri-state areas. So there's a huge electrical risk and a risk to them potentially as far as their safety, just being around that equipment, let alone the exposure to RF radio frequency that would be existing up there. That's a known risk. So that's something that that will obviously be concerning. So you have that risk as well. And then, you know, did they get up through where the maintenance is done on those transmitters? So the transmitters are on a separate floor in a separate area, and there is roof access there. I'm not going to get into all the details because I really don't want to have to do this again with people getting access to it. But there is a way to get up there, and there is a way to be able to get up to these floors, and then to be able to do the maintenance on that transmission equipment. If you look to the individual whose back is to us, there's kind of a gray column on the right-hand side. That is an active antenna, and so they would need to do maintenance on that from time to time. This harkens back to an incident. Remember, my colleague Jonathan Dienst and I happened to be at a private social event one night, and I called Jonathan because their cameras spotted sparks coming off of the Empire State Building after a high-profile terror arrest. I was concerned, he was concerned. We didn't know that they were doing maintenance on the top of the tower, but we wondered if somebody had gotten access to it. So, yes, there is access for people to be able to get up there and do the work, but obviously enormous security questions here. How were they able to get up there?
Tom, as we are watching these surreal images, I think this is live pictures from Chopper 4 from WNBC here in New York. It does appear that these two people are climbing down on their own. They do not appear to be wearing any sort of ropes or climbing apparatus at all.
Nope.
And it looks like at least the person on top has some sort of hood with cat ears or like a Batman-like mask. Talk about what kind of potential criminal charges they could be facing for carrying out this stunt.
Yeah, criminal trespassing, and then they'll try to add any potential charges from there, because obviously they'll be concerned about making sure that there's enough of a deterrent, and then any sort of interruption of commerce or things like that. So it does appear that they're putting away maybe that flag or that area where there's equipment. They're now much lower. They're on a lower section. There's still transmission equipment below them, so there's still antennas.
Yeah.
They're not out of the woods when it comes to safety at this point.
One of them looks like they're taking something out of a backpack at this point, a long stick or pole.
Yeah, I couldn't tell if they were putting that away or they were taking it out. I agree with you, Vicky. There's no indication they're wearing any sort of climbing harness or any sort of something that would allow them to hook into the supports, which, by the way, are there for the maintenance people I was talking about before.
At what point, Tom, would law enforcement intervene? And did I hear you correctly that you said these are the same two individuals that have attempted something similar?
No, that was a separate incident. That's many years ago. But just to highlight the fact that this is a concern, but also to highlight the fact that there is maintenance that is done on it. So there is access to this area of the roof, and that maintenance is not done by helicopter. When would law enforcement intervene? Look, the NYPD is already there. Their aviation unit is already there. They're ready to fly at a moment's notice. They can get from their base to this area within 10 minutes if they're not already in the air, and they're frequently up for all sorts of things. So yeah, they can get there. They are aware of the access to this, and the emergency services unit, in order to graduate, they have to climb up the Brooklyn Bridge in harnesses. That's something that's part of their training. But you're looking at them there now that we've widened out.
They look like they're setting something up, Tom.
They have, they're still fair ways above the ground and a decent spot above the area where they would be, where they would be in safety. So who knows what they're going to do from here? The good news is at least they're on a platform. The winds are not too serious today, so that's good news. And the good news is there's also a lot of coordination between the news helicopters in New York City amongst themselves, among air traffic control, as well as NYPD aviation. But at least at this point, they're on their 2 feet on a firm surface.
It is, sorry.
No, go ahead, Sam.
It's July 1st. We are 3 days away from having Sail 250, and you have all these World Cup matches going on, and just thousands upon thousands of tourists coming into New York City. We're listening to the NYPD briefing the area on the steps they're taking to keep people safe, while simultaneously 2 people have scaled the spire of the Empire State Building. If you're law enforcement and you're seeing this unfold while you're trying to calm and assuage people that everything is under control for the coming days, I guess, how do you thread that needle?
Well, this is private property, so the security and the day-to-day operations of the Empire State Building belongs to
Okay, now they're hugging. Tom, I'm sorry to interrupt you. The live pictures, they look like, is this a proposal? No. They're making out on this platform on the Empire State Building after setting up what is some kind of a pole on that little orange.
Looks like a selfie stick.
Perhaps it does look like a GoPro stick. This is absolutely bonkers. Here he is on one knee. It looks like he's opening up a jewelry box here. Well, I might be on a little bit of a delay, but I think I'm following what the audience is seeing too. You're absolutely right. That does look like a GoPro on a selfie stick.
Whether this is for some sort of personal feat, or it's to make a political point, or it's completely unrelated to all of that, seeing all of this, and by the way, one of the people out there is apparently taking pictures of their finger right now to
the engagement ring finger.
The idea that this is a proposal, whatever the intent was, Tom. I know you said it's private security, but at a time when there's so much tension in New York City over what the next couple of days are going to look like, what would you imagine NYPD would want to communicate to the general public right now?
Well, what they're certainly going to do is have a discussion with the Empire State Building security, number one, because there's obviously a key part. You see NYPD units rolling up now with lights and sirens. You see news trucks there all on the street level, obviously hundreds of feet below them. Look, this is the type of thing that they want to avoid. It's the reason why they talk to buildings all the time. It's the reason why they talk to the building that we work in. And so, yes, there is, I think, it is possible that that selfie stick that we saw, or the GoPro stick, as you pointed out, Vicky, could be connected to a live stream. That's something that we're actively looking at, and so is law enforcement. So this may be a duo that had planned for this and had advertised this, and so that's something that we're going to keep an eye on here. And as part of the ongoing investigation from a law enforcement perspective, But again, they're in a less precarious situation than they were before, and let's hope they get down from there in a way that doesn't put anybody else at risk or members of the general public.
Exactly. I think that is a really important point, Tom. While this may be, a moment that they'll never forget, this could have unnecessarily risked so many lives, created so many complications. At a time when New York City is already on heightened alert with a lot of events happening this weekend for the 4th of July holiday.
And they're still, by the way, significantly elevated from the observatory at the Empire State Building. That's the 86th floor. We are going to transition once again to our partners here at NBC New York to pick up their coverage.
Hang on, stay here. I'm sorry, guys. We got to stay here. I do want to tell you that, in fact, and I'm not going to give this couple any more attention that they need to, but they are streaming this. The woman who's up there is streaming this incident at this time. They have also taken Instagram posts and have posted it from the top of the Empire State Building, and so this is definitely a group that appears to be sending images back to an assistant that is posting it, and it's getting a lot of attention online.
So
but based on the views and the information,
identify them.
I think the identification is pretty clear at this point. I'm just doing a little verification to make sure that this is an AI in today's day and age. This is today's day and age operation. People doing this for their social media and doing all sorts of things. But obviously, this is a situation where, based on the information that I'm receiving from law enforcement and information that I am watching on my own phone, there appears to be a significant social media component of this. Again, that'll all be part of the investigation, but I think at this point it'll probably be pretty clear to the NYPD exactly who these people are.
Yep. So you mentioned criminal trespass charges. Does that carry any potential jail time? Are we thinking about a fine?
It could. I would have to look at all of this. I mean, the fact if there's any sort of damage to the transmission up there, that's interference with interstate commerce, because obviously these signals are broadcast across multiple states. They're part of federal licensed facilities. That could be part of it as well. This is a licensed transmission facility. You don't need to be us to, you can just look at the screen and know that. So I don't have all those particulars. I think they are at a point that they could now scale the rest of this inside of that tower apparatus that you're looking at. There's FM radio signals, those things that kind of look like they're spaghetti noodles that are coming out to the side, not the kind of firm, rigid, rectangular pieces, but those are FM antennas that are surrounded in radomes to protect from ice. So the interior, that black portion of the interior of the tower that you're looking at there, that's all the transmission line coming up. And I believe, if memory serves correctly, you can climb through that portion of it, which would be a little bit safer than having to climb on the outside where the antenna arrays are.
But just the law enforcement resources that had to be deployed to ensure that nobody was injured throughout the process of all this time is significant. And I'm struck by the juxtaposition of these two people up there on the spire as there's just all these citizens below just walking on the streets of New York, seemingly with no idea what's going on just above them.
Yeah, and your timing was perfect there because the NYPD helicopter came through. You've got an officer that's now clearly out there. They would require at least 2 to 3 helicopters is typically the stance of the NYPD because they're going to want to have a unit that can spot, a close unit for support for the officers at a minimum. The NYPD has a drone unit as well, and then the emergency services officers who hopefully won't have to put themselves in harm's way. But that's what we're looking at here. It's obviously something that we hope ends well, but obviously hope that these individuals learn a lesson from this because if they had slipped or if something had happened, to your point, the people on the street, some innocent person before a perimeter could be set up, could be killed. And this is going to disrupt traffic and people's ability to do business at that area for a significant period of time. They're going to have to block these streets if they're not blocked already.
The proposal we didn't need on the top of the Empire State Building.
They had a flag that they unfurled, a proposal, and apparently a live stream. All of this going on, it started, by the way, at 12:04. So this has only been about 35 or 40 minutes of activity at the top of the Empire State Building, as it does now appear, Vicky, that the two individuals that were behind this are now at a safer place, if not fully back to safety, as you're seeing law enforcement buzzing around the top of the spire.
Literally in 3 different helicopters. Let's hope no more resources are wasted and no one is hurt.
Welcome back to News Daily. We have been tracking some breaking news here that's been going on for about the last 45 minutes or so when 2 people appeared to scale the top of the Empire State Building, and finally Vicky, have started to make their way down to more solid ground. But it's been a bizarre sequence of events.
Absolutely. I'm Vicky Wynn along here with Sam Brock, and we've got Tom Winter in studio with us as we believe these folks are coming down after being at the top of the Empire State Building, the antenna there. It appears they are now descending inside that cage-like structure. What we think we witnessed was potentially a proposal. At one point, one of the individuals got down on his knee. There was a selfie stick with what appeared to be a camera on the end of it. The other person, the woman, seems like she was taking some photos of her ring finger where she got the engagement ring. All of this, a stunt that was apparently live streamed. Is that right, Tom Winter?
There was a link to it now, a link to a live stream. It's the Empire State Building's own camera. So they linked to that, but they did have a social media post. And I'm not going to put out the social media name because to do this and to put, themselves and everybody else at so much danger, I'll leave that up to others to decide. But these two individuals did post an image from the top there that is very clearly matches, the description matches. It does appear to be the couple. That's all part of the law enforcement investigation at this point. As I mentioned prior to them climbing down this way, this is the safest way to get down. This is set up for the tower crews to be able to get to work. You're looking at, I believe that is a TV transmitter, that gray circular column there on the left. On the right are part of the FM antennas. This facility, since One World Trade Center was built, has become a little bit more of a backup than a primary. But after 9/11, then the North Tower, One World Trade Center, was the primary transmission site in New York City. Then everything switched to Empire State as well as Alpine, New Jersey, to be able to get those signals out after those towers fell following that terrorist attack. And then the Empire State Building kind of got a little bit more of a backseat again once One World Trade Center went up and the transmission facilities there, which are able to be modernized and hold more equipment than the base of this, which is where they will probably head into next. So it does appear that they were able to get access through some part of where individuals would come up through the transmission area. That'll be critical to see here as they approach this landing. Will they then just kind of continue through the access point that I believe, if memory serves correctly, is below this. So there will be enormous questions now for the Empire State Building, its security team, as well as the various radio and television ownership that is there to be able to access. If I remember correctly, NBC is now over at One World Trade Center. So that's just a sense of what's there. But a number of major radio stations are transmitting. Presumably some of these signals are live. That is a radiation risk to this couple. But that is something that'll, again, all be part of that. Just hopefully they get down safely and nobody else gets hurt, I think is the big concern at this point.
Yeah, absolutely.
As you described, a stunning breach of security. And it comes with the backdrop of one of the biggest days of the year in recent memory coming up on July 4th, right? You have Sail 250. You have all these dignitaries in town, thousands upon thousands of tourists, and the NYPD had just been holding a security briefing.
I was in the room. Which
you attended to try to explain what the profile is going to look like in the days ahead.
Yeah, I mean, there's some, Sail 250, NBC is broadcasting that. We've got the fireworks celebration on July 4th. So there are huge events here in New York City. Oh, by the way, an event at Madison Square Garden.
Taylor Swift's potential wedding to Travis Kelce.
Of another couple. So that is going to be something that that the NYPD was focused on. I just got into the subway underneath City Hall, and our colleague Jonathan Deans called me and said, I said, hey, John, I'm on the subway. I'll catch you when I get back to the building. He said, 10 seconds, they're climbing the antenna. They're climbing the antenna. So that's how this all came about.
Yeah, and it's been about 12:04 is when we believe that they were first spotted at the very top. Sam, you said it's 1,450 feet above the ground?
1,554 feet. That's the top of the spire. The observatory, which is just below them, is 86 floors above the ground, right? And so just watching this breathtaking sequence, terrifying, as you have two people that appeared to be tethered to nothing, unfurling a flag which said, when the power of love beats the love of power, the world knows peace. We did not know, Vicky, what their intention was. And so now that it appears it was a proposal and they're back down in the building,
a little bit of a relief, right?
There's some relief, but this has just been a lot to absorb.
Welcome back to NBC News Daily. We're following breaking news right here in New York City, where two people climbed to the top of the Empire State Building.
Take a close look at this. Your eyes are not deceiving you. They are wearing all black in some kind of cat mask, it looks like. They unfurled a banner that says, when the power of love beats the love of power, the world knows peace.
Now, they eventually made their way down to a platform where it appears the duo live streamed their climb and even got engaged more than 1,400 feet above the ground. Right now, it is extremely unclear how they made it past security and onto the observation deck to make their way up the spire. This happened just as the city is preparing for a big weekend celebrating the 4th of July.
So many things going on here. NBC News national law enforcement and intelligence correspondent Tom Winter joining us now. Can we talk about the fact, Tom, what we're learning, that this was all being live streamed, these two, as they were on top of the spire? What are you learning about that?
Yeah, so the live stream appears to be the Empire State Building's webcam, which the couple links to. They also post clear images from some of the, this was from some of the video we watched earlier, when they were up on kind of that middle level above the FM transmission component of this, and prior to some of the TV transmission of this. There's kind of a steel grate, if you will, a ledge there that it appears that they posted, or they say that their assistant posted to them being there. And so that is an incredible thing. I will tell you now that the NYPD Emergency Services Unit, according to a senior law enforcement official to NBC News, says that the ESU is up there. That is the NYPD. The NYPD doesn't have SWAT, if you will, but they have Emergency Services Unit, which falls under the Special Operations Division. They are there. They are up there right now at Empire State Building. I think this couple will probably come down to a lot more followers on Instagram and also matching handcuffs for both of them. They do anticipate them to be charged at this point. All indications from law enforcement officials to us is that these social media posts that we are seeing are real. Obviously, in this day and age, we always think about AI as just a hoax. We don't want to get duped. We do try to do the diligence, but to the best of our ability, the Instagram that does belong to this couple, particularly the woman that's involved in this, that it is in fact her account and these images are in fact real. That is the current belief in law enforcement. As their investigation continues, there will be an identification of these two already made, as you can imagine, based off of that, or at least what they believe. That image on the right, you're looking at a truck where the lights are kind of flashing vertically as the camera now pans over. That's all part of Emergency Services Unit. They're on the clock 24/7, 365. All of them have to be equipped and be able to climb. In order to graduate from ESU, you have to climb the Brooklyn Bridge. I've been there when they've done that.
Wow.
And so they have to climb that up. Now, they will have the harnesses, the clips, the everything, and a whole team put into play. They routinely practice. Sometimes you may not see them in the city, but they are out there practicing. You know, just a couple of years ago, right around July 4th, a woman climbed the Statue of Liberty, and they had to go up and rescue her and get her off of there. And so they hung ropes all off of the Statue of Liberty, and they also had several helicopters, one that's close to provide close information to the team, and then a second helicopter that provides them kind of a larger view of it. The NYPD has a number of helicopters, so the ability to deploy multiple helicopters to something like this and still service the calls that come in throughout the city for everything else that goes on in this three-ring circus we live in.
Tom, I know you've got two phones working for our viewers who aren't aware. You've got multiple sources who are keeping you updated with the very latest information on the investigation, what officers are thinking. At this point, are they waiting for the couple to come down on their own so as not to risk more lives? I know the ESU, as you mentioned, is very well trained, but at this point, they're waiting for them to come down to apprehend them. I think my biggest question is what can be done, number one, to shore up security so this doesn't happen again at the Empire State Building, and number two, to deter people, because based on this Instagram account, it does look like they have done this in various other cities atop various other buildings around the world, if these photos and videos are to be believed. And you just wonder, is it just because it's a misdemeanor or it's just minor that, you know, this major inconvenience can be caused? It can be a dangerous situation for people on the ground, for our first responders. And then there's not really a deterrent component to this.
Yeah, Vicky, that's a huge component of this. It is something that creates issues at construction sites. It's something that creates issues at major landmarks. It presents a security risk for sure. There appears to be a risk-reward calculation for these influencers of jail time versus the massive amount of followers and how I monetize that. And so I think what you're going to see here is the police department and the Manhattan District Attorney's Office really see how much can they throw at individuals like this. On top of the obvious security issue, we had a zoomed-in shot on the right-hand side before where you saw a member of the NYPD with a cell phone to his ear and in a suit on. That's Detective Tony Pissarro of the NYPD. So he'll be there to coordinate some sort of a press briefing on the ground. You saw supervisors, the officers in white shirts. Those are supervisors also with emergency services units. So they have everybody there that they need. I think at this point, to get to your first question, they're going to want to see if this couple is willing to come down and just get inside on their own. Yeah. That's going to be best for everybody. That's going to be safest for them. That's going to be safest for the officers and anybody that's around. They are in a much better spot than they were 35, 40 minutes ago when I first came down here, and they were literally just with a flag out, holding on with presumably no clips or harnesses to the side of that building. So that is something that is was very concerning because you still had members of the public there. Look, you're seeing the NYPD. They've cleared the sidewalk. Those are all members of the NYPD that you see walking there. But all of those individuals are going to be, are going to be part of the police response. The good news is they're in a better spot now where their odds of radically falling off of this building are almost zero. Hopefully they can just get them inside.
To Vicky's earlier point, it certainly seems like this was performative. When you look at the social media account of one of the people that linked to the live stream, it talks about pushing the boundaries of what's acceptable in art and neo-artist exploring identity. But let's just say, Tom, because we didn't know what their intent is, and frankly, these two individuals are not in handcuffs yet, so we don't know what their intent could be. Is there a sweep for explosives or anything else that could be dangerous? I mean, you just think about where we are contextually right now with all these people coming into New York City.
I think the motivations of this couple are pretty clear, but yeah, they're going to take a hard look at everything that they have on them. They're going to take a look at all the bags that we saw and, is there anything on their person that they want to be concerned about? This appears to be much more for clout than for terror, but obviously it raises concerns. And, given the fact that this will be a part of the July 4th celebration, something obviously that they're going to be focused on in the days ahead. Definitely some planning went into this. This does not feel like, to me, a couple that just showed up that were part of the, they have bags on them, things that may not be allowed to be up there if you're part of the observatory tour. And the way that they've presumably have accessed this point tells me that there was definitely some planning that occurred. That'll be part of the investigation, too. Did anybody help them?
Right.
Did anybody tell them this is where you need to go?
Inside.
Or maybe you should open this hatch where there's normally massive padlocks to the roof. That padlock might be open. So that'll be a bit of a question mark and a bit of concern as well.
All right.
Tom, we really appreciate all the insight here. Stand by for a second. We're going to bring in now former NYPD Lieutenant Darren Porcher. Lieutenant Porcher, thanks so much. What can you tell us, I guess, when you look at this broad brushstrokes, the security breach that just happened at the Empire State Building, does it shock you? Is this something that needs to be immediately examined? What are your first takeaways from seeing this all play out?
Well, from the first component, as it relates to the response, you have the emergency service unit truck 1 that responded, which is, I want to say it's maybe roughly a mile away. And what's unique about the members of ESU truck 1 is they do a lot of the rope work. When I say the rope work, meaning oftentimes we have individuals that are dangling from scaffolds in Midtown Manhattan, but ESU truck 1 is the best in the business as it relates to getting to people that are on these high surfaces on these skyscrapers. Now we fast forward to the scenario that we have in play. How do they effectively get to this individual, as the two individuals, as quickly and as safely as possible? One, the Empire State Building is a high-value target. We have a series of various high-value targets in the lower, or I want to say we refer to this as the Midtown Quadrant area, such as Madison Square Garden, the Chrysler Building, or this building in particular, which is the Empire State Building. So we have a tremendous understanding or knowledge of the intricacies of the Empire State Building. One of the challenges that, I shouldn't say a challenge, but one of the things that the police department is going to do is upon taking these two individuals into custody, they're going to look into their social media, they're going to look into their cell phones, they're going to look into their computers to assess if there was a possible a collaborator that was part of this.
Darren, we really appreciate that additional context and history here. I want to bring Tom Winter back in. Tom, you've just gotten some confirmation, and you can describe some of the images that were taken at the top of the Empire State Building by this couple.
Well, the posts are coming in. We are not describing the social media account at this time. It is a part of the police investigation, but I think it might be a little bit difficult to fake some of this stuff. There are photos that are being posted. We mentioned the selfie stick that we saw earlier when they were on that gray platform that was above this one. That's up there in the sky. You see the individual down on one knee. There is an engagement ring. There is a couple holding hands. And so this has now been posted. It appears that this couple is are sending these images to another person who is then posting it, because there's some things that are coming off of clearly screen grabbed images from various news helicopters that might be up there. But there are photos up there that presumably only this couple could take. The skyline matches, the haze in the air. I think it's pretty clear that this is the couple that's responsible for this. And that's something the police investigate. It's that right there where we just saw the individual who's down on his knee, and then that stick. You see the two lights there for the top of the Empire State Building on the right side of that steel grating there, that parapet. There's appears to be a selfie stick there. That's where it seems that they gathered some of these images from, and you see there. She's capturing the engagement ring on her hand, and that appears to be the post that I just described to you.
If you're law enforcement and you're watching this all unfold, at one point you decide, okay, I guess I'm not going to try to intervene and attach myself to this antenna to try to in some way affect what this couple is doing, and it's just innocuous, or how do you even make that determination?
Yeah, I mean, they're going to try to engage in a dialogue with these two. The fact that they're posting engagement photos would lead you not to believe that these are master terrorists at this point. But that's all part of the calculation that they'll do. They'll want to talk to them, engage with them, get a sense of who are we actually dealing with here, and then make your risk adjustments. On the other hand, they don't want them spending all day up there and have a situation where not only themselves, but others could be hurt. So it's just kind of a continual calculation.
Darren, we got about 40 seconds left. Can I bring you back in? I'm just curious what kind of criminal charges you think this couple could be facing. Do we still have Darren with us?
You're going to see. Yes, you're going to see a reckless endangerment felony, because an individual can identify there's a perceived risk if one of them fall off and hit someone that's on the ground that can cause a serious physical injury or death. So we're going to have the reckless endangerment felony. In addition to that, we're going to have a trespass as well as a disorderly conduct.
All right, and they should be coming down momentarily. Darren Porcher with the NYPD, Tom Winter, thank you both. We're going to go to break, but we will continue to follow this story. We'll be right back. You're watching.
One of the kids' birthdays, and they were literally going on their way up to do the tour, to go to the observatory deck, and they were turned away. They started seeing officers running by them. They said, everyone's got to get down. So, he said, because of those two people, they were telling people exactly what was going on, but obviously they were turned away, and they then had to exit the building. So they didn't get, the full, complete experience, obviously, but the kid was saying, maybe this is a bit of a taste of New York, just kind of the crazy things that can happen. Of course, everyone here that I'm talking to are like, okay, I hope they're okay, but some of these workers, they're a little frustrated. It's, 90 degrees. They want to go back inside. They got work to get done. And everyone's kind of in a holding pattern outside of the couple of entrances that I have been on the 33rd side. What I'm also seeing, I'll tell you, is that the police are putting up, a taped off area on 33rd as well. So there's a lot of officers that are kind of guarding a section of the sidewalk. So is that where they will be brought down to and walked out to? Not sure, but there's definitely some action on a section of the sidewalk that they are taping off with police officers all around and a police car as well.
Yeah, Justin, to your point, they're not just using city services, but it's interrupting the lives of New Yorkers, people who are trying to get to work on this very hot day, and then people who are visiting here, and perhaps this was their only opportunity to see this. So this is having some different kinds of consequences. It's not just a concern about their safety. Thank you, Jess, for your perspective. Let's check in with Chief Investigative Reporter Jonathan Deans in the newsroom, who's been following this along with us. John, do you have some new information?
Yeah, an NYPD spokesman now says the two climbers are in custody. They are under arrest. They will be processed, as Terry Monahan was explaining. So the incident appears to be coming to an end with them now in custody at the Empire State Building, and they will be taken to an area precinct for processing before the Manhattan District Attorney's office moves forward with whatever charges they decide to file. So we're waiting to hear from the Manhattan DA's office, but an NYPD spokesman moments ago saying the two individuals are now in custody.
So this is the best case scenario ending to this saga that unfolded here for over an hour, John. These two individuals precariously at the top of this spire, now thankfully in police custody on solid ground.
Yes, it appears that they are in custody. We await their departure from the Empire State Building to be taken to the local precinct again. These two appear to have done documentaries and social media postings of past incidents like this around the globe, around the country, and this appears to be the latest iteration. The NYPD not yet releasing the names, confirming that it's these two so-called skywalkers, but that information should be released officially soon, and we will learn more about the two of them and how they were able to get around security at the Empire State Building after the Empire State security team and the NYPD go over some of the surveillance videos and speak with some of the security teams as to how they were able to evade security and gain access to what is supposed to be a secure location.
John, what's interesting to me is we're learning that these two are artists, that they pulled off stunts similar to this in the past. But to your knowledge, from what you were gathering, you were saying that they don't appear to have a criminal past here.
Yeah, my colleague Courtney Copenhagen did a search of their names and all of the court records, and there's nothing in the immediate area here that indicates they've tried a stunt like this in the past. But there are previous incidents, what appears to be in Chicago and overseas, of course, numerous postings on social media that appear to show that they've done this numerous times. But again, NYPD spokesperson, as we reported a few minutes ago, saying both of them are, both suspects, both climbers are now in custody, and we await word on what the charges will be filed against them.
Yeah, in this case, police know exactly who the perpetrators are as they waited for them to get down safely and to get them into custody. But it also appears that these two protesters, these two artists, are providing the evidence for them by documenting their stunts. John.
Well, it's going to be a pretty open and shut case. The question is, you know, how severe the Manhattan District Attorney's office is going to treat this, whether they're going to accept it that it's art and it's a stunt, or was it terribly reckless and they put their own lives and the lives of others in danger as they try to pull off this stunt. So the question will be what kind of accountability the Manhattan District Attorney's office is going to handle this matter with. And again, based on some of the social media postings, on top of it being a stunt, again, there was the embrace, there was the appearance of a possible proposal on the deck up there after they had posted that banner. So again, we wait to learn more about exactly why they chose the Empire State Building this July 4th week and what their purpose was, whether it was personal, whether it was part of their social media postings that they have done repeatedly in the past. and or whether there was any sort of engagement, as Chopper 4 was speaking about early on during this incident. But again, the two are in custody, and we wait to learn more about what the charges will be shortly. Back to you.
John, thank you. We're about to also learn more about the DA's definition of art here shortly. Joining us now is our Erica Byfield, who is live there on the ground just outside of the Empire State Building. And Erica, you're speaking with an employee who works at the Empire State Building.
That's right, Gilma. We were talking to her just seconds ago. I'm going to introduce you here to Sydney. She works at the Centric branch. She was telling me that she works here on the 4th floor of this building. And as you can imagine, a lot of people are out here trying to just kind of get a glimpse from this corner where we're standing to understand what's happening here. So I was asking her just moments ago, how challenging would it be to get upstairs where they were?
It'd probably be very hard. I mean, there's security at like every single doorway every day that like greets you and they see your ID badges, and as well you have to scan in anyway to get through the turnstiles. So like any elevator access is definitely really hard to get to. And then all the other doors are ticketed with people who like are really watching. So I don't know how. At first I thought they tried to like scale the outside of the building, but we definitely would have heard about that sooner.
Yeah. What about the stairs? How easy is it to access the stairs?
Oh, not very easy. It's still like turnstile access to get into those stairwell hallways.
You were telling me everyone inside is watching the news. They're kind of glued to what's happening. Is that right?
Oh, yeah. I was hearing a lot of chatter about it for a while, and then you would like watch as different areas of the office started putting it on their computers and watching.
So they're now just opening the street here behind us because, as we heard Jonathan Dienst reporting, these two people are currently in custody. So we're seeing it all live here unfold. Sydney, what are your managers saying? Is the Empire staff, building management, saying anything about what's happening here today?
A little bit. They told us about which doors were closed down, but there's not too much going on of that sort.
Quite a day?
What a day. So exciting.
Well, thank you again, Sydney. She's actually worked here in this building for about a month, so she says she's new to this facility, but as you can tell, she's saying that it's pretty hard to get anywhere inside this building, so everyone's kind of baffled as to how they got up there, and of course the NYPD will be looking into all of that. But as you can see here behind me, the street has just reopened. You can see media moving forward, members of the public moving forward, so we have teams on the other side of the street. We'll get a better understanding of the scene over there on 33rd Street just shortly. We'll send it back to you.
Erica, while we have you there, we can see that street reopening, but you've been talking to people down there. Talk to us about the interruption, not just to the employees, but possibly the people who were trying to get into that building to get a rare opportunity to be on the deck, take some photos with their families. Are you hearing any stories like that?
Yeah, we are, Gilma. A lot of people, as you know, this is an iconic spot. They wanted to be here to take in everything that New York City has to offer, and so many of them obviously were planning on doing this today. And I can tell you that we actually parked our vehicle near the door where the observation tickets are sold, and that's the entrance that you go into if you want to go upstairs. We saw the staff there allowing people to come inside the facility. So we don't know if they're able to eventually get on those elevators. If you've been here before, you know that long ride upstairs. We don't know if they were able to do that, but they did not shut down the outside of the facility, and they allowed people inside. And as you heard there just from Sydney, she was saying that the employees were instructed that the building was technically still open. They just were restricted as to which doors that they could come in. We've talked to a lot of other people who are New Yorkers and those who aren't, and they wanted to be here just to kind of stand at this corner where we were and peer upstairs, peer into the sky to see if you can see anything. I can tell you from our vantage point, you could not, and so that is why everyone had their phones out there watching the news coverage, because they wanted to be up to date on everything that was going on above. Gilma?
Yeah, only in New York, but an ordinary day for New Yorkers as well. Erica, thank you. Let's check back in with Jonathan Dienst. John, we see that the streets are reopening there. Yet another indication that this thing could be finally wrapping up.
NYPD putting out a statement. The full statement as of now is on Wednesday, July 1st at approximately noon. 2 unknown individuals were observed on the antenna of the Empire State Building located at 20 West 34th Street within the confines of the Midtown South Precinct. The NYPD report statement goes on. NYPD's Emergency Services Unit responded. 2 individuals were taken into custody without incident. There are no reported injuries. Charges are pending, and the investigation remains ongoing. A short time ago, we did get video of the two suspects being driven away in a police van, which was just fed into our newsroom a short time ago, and they are being taken from in that van. There you see the image. And they were driven from there, we believe, to the Midtown South Precinct for processing. We reached out to the Manhattan District Attorney's Office, and they say they are awaiting first the NYPD to file the arrest charges, and then we will hear from the District Attorney's Office as to how they plan to proceed with this matter. But that's the van where we are told the two suspects, the two climbers, were put into custody at the Empire State Building and taken away, presumably, to the Midtown South Precinct, a short distance away, for processing on whatever criminal charges the NYPD decides to file against them, and then it'll be on the Manhattan District Attorney's Office on how to proceed.
And John, it's worth noting, despite how lighthearted the protester artist message appeared to be, a message about love, this certainly utilized a lot of city emergency personnel. It was a very serious situation, not just a smile and nod kind of situation. So many people could have been in danger, including those two artists, but also NYPD officials responding to the situation.
The artists, granted, they have done this many times in the past and are presumably expert at climbing structures like this. Nonetheless, it is extremely dangerous and reckless. The NYPD officers having to, July 4th week, extend all these extra resources to respond to a stunt like this, obviously also a matter of concern. Also something that concerned me as I was watching it. They were setting up cameras right on the edge of the platform, and the question of whether any wind gust or anything could possibly blow one of those cameras or items off the ledge down to onlookers below. All of this serious concerns, and fortunately they did their stunt. They climbed down. Again, the NYPD saying there are no injuries. Everyone has been taken down safely. But the NYPD obviously treating this seriously, and we await to hear what charges they will file. We have seen stunts like this, not only done by these two climbers in the past. We've seen other stunts like this across this city and in other cities by others. But according to Courtney Copenhagen, our producer who was researching these two, there's no previous incident or criminal incident involving these two in New York previously.
Yeah, the best resolution that officers could have hoped for. Two people now in custody after a nearly 1.5-hour saga after protesters, artists made their way up to the top of the spire of the Empire State Building. We're going to continue to follow any updates on the News 4 app and NBCNewYork.com. The News Zone will have the latest streaming at 3 o'clock, and we will see you for the news, of course. Now,
we are continuing to follow breaking news right here in New York City, where two people who climbed to the top of the Empire State Building are now in police custody, according to the NYPD.
We just saw an NYPD van pulling away with both of those individuals inside. Charges have not yet been filed. It did appear to be all part of a proposal stunt where the two of them first unfurled a pro-peace banner when they got to the top of the spire of the Empire State Building.
That duo eventually climbed down the spire and onto a platform where one of the trespassers appeared to propose to the other.
Stranger than fiction. NBC News national law enforcement and intelligence correspondent Tom Winter joining us now. We are, I guess, at this point still waiting, Tom, to hear what kind of charges they might face.
That's right. And there's nothing that's going to rush the police department to do this. There are some very basic ones. I mean, certainly trespassing. I'm guessing the Empire State Building did not sign off on this, but obviously that'll be part of the investigation. And then they'll look at all sorts of other charges that they can throw at it. Because, look, this was a very serious incident from a security standpoint and from also the potential to injure others, which, according to an NYPD statement that we just got in, they say that there are no injuries to any other individuals, police, civilians, or this couple, which is obviously the silver lining here, the good news out of all of this. So they'll take some time. They'll look at that. They'll coordinate with the Manhattan District Attorney's Office. They got to get the paperwork for the NYPD and then consider the types of charges. You're looking there. That van is where apparently, according to our station WNBC here in New York, is where the couple was put into. They were put into that van. You can't really see them there. And then we're taken to presumably the Midtown South precinct, where they will be interviewed by detectives if they want to give a statement, and then they'll conduct their investigation and go from there. It will take some time. I believe that's the chief of the Special Operations Division that we saw there on the ground, who oversees the people that would have climbed up to get this couple had that been necessary. So the good news is this ends without anybody getting hurt. This appears to be some sort of a social media stunt, perhaps a promotion for an upcoming show. It's incredibly dangerous, incredibly reckless, and I can tell you that the police department is furious about this because of the potential danger that it posed.
And the fact that it's happening ahead of the 4th of July celebrations, the Sail 250 celebration, and the potential wedding of Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce. The city is on heightened alert already. Let's go ahead and bring in NBC News correspondent Valerie Castro. She's standing by live outside of the Empire State Building. Valerie, do we have a sense of how this couple managed to make it past the private security of the Empire State Building and climb up the spire? Have we heard anything from building management or security at this point?
Vicki, at this point, that is still very unclear. The Empire State Building is more than 100 stories tall, and if you've ever visited the inside, it takes multiple elevators to actually get to the very top observation deck, and from there, there's plenty of security, there's plenty of fencing around, so unclear how they were able to climb the very top antenna that sits at the very, very tip top of the Empire State Building. But you can see police are still here. They do still have a portion of Fifth Avenue closed, even though the couple is now reportedly in custody, according to police. The crowds were here earlier. This happened around lunchtime. Lots of people walking around, stopped to take a look. They were looking as far as they could see to the very, very tip top of the building, although, of course, from ground level, it's really, really tough to see all the way up there. But again, at this point, it appears the couple is in custody. The crowds have dissipated at this point. Not to mention, it's an extremely hot day here in New York City, so standing out here for more than a few minutes is very uncomfortable. But again, just one of the wilder things to happen in the city, especially, as you mentioned, during a busy, busy time of year for the NYPD. Vicki?
And Valerie, let me just ask you, the fact that you're able to stand in the middle of the street like that, police had that blocked off as of 15 or 20 minutes ago. Can you walk us through, what the reaction has been on the ground? It was this just bizarre split screen where you had two people tethered to nothing at the top of the Empire State Building and all of these pedestrians just going about their day below them on the streets of Midtown Manhattan. Do people seem shocked at this point? Are they still sort of trying to process this? Describe the mood for us.
Yes, Emma, as you mentioned, there's a lot of pedestrians around here, a lot of traffic. This is Fifth Avenue down the middle of New York City. It is currently closed. Police have it closed off at about 35th Street. 34th runs right here where the Empire State Building is. People had heard that there was somebody on top of the Empire State Building. They weren't sure. They were checking. We asked some people what they thought when they heard there was a proposal at the top of the building. They said that was just crazy. Some people were here visiting from California. They were planning to actually go to the Empire State Building right before this happened. And in the meantime, they decided to just stand across the street and take this all in and watch. There's a gentleman we spoke to who works in the area. This is a busy part of Manhattan. You see a lot of crazy things. He says he's never seen anything quite like this, guys.
Question, Valerie, this is such an only in New York story. Stand by for us. I know it's hot out there. Tom, let me bring you back in because this couple does appear to have over 1 million followers on social media. It appears from their account they're attached to an upcoming documentary about these exact type of high-rise stunts that they perform all over the world. Talk to us about what you're seeing on the account that seems to verify what we all saw unfolding live at the top of the Empire State Building.
Yeah, I think there's little doubt left, and I think the police department is trying to figure out who these individuals actually are. This may not be their actual names, and so that's something that they want to look into versus the names that we see on social media or on these alleged or purported accounts. So they've posted images that show the actual engagement ring that appear to come from that selfie stick that we see them adjusting here in this video taken earlier this afternoon, and as well as some images that were taken from news helicopters. So it appears that somebody was posting this for them, but they indicated, because they had sent out an image before or an Instagram story, that an assistant was actually posting this. People are obviously commenting on it real time, as you can only imagine, and that these two have done this type of stunt work before. The images look kind of AI, so that was initially why I wasn't quite sure, but this had been passed along to us from people in law enforcement in terms of they're looking at this as potentially being the couple, and so that obviously got everybody's attention. So this all does appear to be part of it, and based on the images that the two posted, particularly the woman who's a member of this couple, it appears that the images are actually authentic.
In this day and age of AI, if you just saw that video, you would think there's no way that's real. But it actually is.
We all watched it.
And so we watched it in real time. Tom, if there are two individuals who have done this over a repeated period of months or years at these famous, iconic places in the world, at some point, wouldn't there be some way to monitor where they're going next? Or how would law enforcement be prepared for something like this?
Yeah, it's a great question, Sam, but I can't tell you how often this happens. I can't tell you how many images I see of people getting into some of these major sites all over the world and climbing to these ridiculous heights and doing these stunts. I can't tell you how many times, and this is something the NYPD has spent a lot of resources on, people try to do a race around Manhattan. They start at one end of the Manhattan, they race around the FDR Drive and up the West Side Highway, trying to beat each other's times, going at incredibly reckless speeds. The NYPD subpoenas those accounts, finds out who the true user is, and then those individuals end up in handcuffs with some very serious charges. So this is something that the NYPD specifically does. Other police departments have done the same type of thing, but a lot of people do this. There are people now that are even taking keys to the subway trains and have moved subway trains from rail yards here in New York City as part of videos that they eventually post online. Talk about a security threat. So really, social media is enticing people to go out and create these images, of course, at great risk, not just to themselves, not just to first responders, but to, if somebody had slipped here, could have killed somebody who was walking there on the street.
Absolutely. I want to bring Valerie Castro back in, who's standing by live outside of the Empire State Building. Valerie, do you have an update in terms of, now that these people have been arrested, taken away in that van, is the Empire State Building going to be back open for business today for all of the visitors who are probably hoping to get a glimpse?
Vicki, right now we don't have word if they will reopen, but I can tell you the road has now reopened. You can see the scene has virtually cleared. Most of the police cars that were here earlier are now gone. Traffic once again moving again here on 5th Avenue, but this investigation is ongoing. So I'm sure police will need to get inside the building, review any sort of surveillance video, and see exactly how this couple or these two people were able to get to the very top of the building, and then on top of that antenna at the very tippy top of the building as well. So no word yet on if the Empire State Building will reopen for visitors today, but it is the middle of summer. It's a very popular tourist attraction. As we mentioned earlier, there were people here from California who said that was in their plans today. At this point, they said they were going to move on and do something else. So unclear if the building will open for visitors again. But as far as the street goes, things are sort of back to normal here. At least traffic is moving again. People moving about their day now that they know that those two people are now in police custody.
Vicki, New York is going to New York.
It truly is. It's the DNA, by the way. A return to normal. What does normal even look like at this point? Our thanks to Valerie and Tom for all that insight. We appreciate it. We're going to continue to follow this story as we get more updates.
We thank you for watching, and remember, stay updated on breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or watch live on our YouTube channel.